Who you marry is perhaps the most important decision that you can possibly make in your life. And I caution men, when you marry a woman, that person should strengthen the relationships in your family, not fracture them. It is a huge red flag if you start even dating someone. If you start dating someone and suddenly all of your friendships fall apart, okay, maybe it was time for you to grow up. You might be able to argue, well, my friends are still partying and I don't want to party anymore, okay? But when your familial relationships begin to fall apart, that is when you should really be asking yourselves a lot of questions.
Imagine being the most powerful woman in Britain. Imagine spending 70 years on a throne tied to a family legacy built over centuries. Imagine opening your doors and personally welcoming your grandson and his American wife into your home, into private conversations, into spaces few people ever get to see, inside one of the most protected palaces in the world. Then imagine quietly wondering whether those conversations could one day become public. That sounds like the setup for a royal drama, but according to a biography released in April 2026, this was reportedly one of Queen Elizabeth II's concerns during the final years of her life. The book, Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History, was written by Hugo Vickers, a royal historian who met the Queen more than 40 times across 6 decades. This is not presented as tabloid gossip or anonymous palace rumors. Vickers is known for his long history covering the royal family and for having direct access over many years. What appears in the book has triggered major discussion across royal circles and among people who have followed the Sussex story from the beginning. The central claim is this: according to sources described as close to the Queen, she reportedly became more careful in her interactions with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The book claims she preferred not to take phone calls from Prince Harry unless another person was present in the room who could independently confirm what was said. Then came the question that caught attention. Hugo Vickers was asked directly whether the Queen feared Harry and Meghan may have been, in his words, wired for recording. His answer was measured. He said, yes. He said, it was always a possibility. Then he added, I'm not saying it happened. That final line is what pushed the conversation further. The suggestion is not that anything was proven, but that concerns about privacy and trust were reportedly serious enough to shape how communication happened behind palace walls. Real enough, according to the book's account, that it reportedly influenced how a reigning monarch handled private conversations. Think about that for a moment. Queen Elizabeth II had lived through some of the biggest shifts in modern history. From the Cold War and major changes across the Commonwealth to decades of public pressure and constant media attention. Yet this account suggests that in her later years, she became more careful in conversations with her grandson because she wanted greater certainty around what was being said and remembered. If that description reflects how she felt, it raises a bigger question. How does a relationship between a grandmother and grandson reach a point where communication reportedly becomes formal and guarded instead of familiar and relaxed? How does a family disagreement grow into something that outsiders start comparing to a dispute being managed with extreme caution? Those questions are part of why this story continues to draw attention in May 2026 as discussion around the royal family remains active. To make sense of what Hugo Vickers is claiming, it helps to look at the full timeline and the events people point to when discussing where trust may have shifted. We are going to go through it piece by piece, starting with the earliest signs of tension, moving through the reporting around concerns over recordings, and ending with why the story has returned to headlines this week. If you are enjoying this breakdown, subscribe and stay with us. We cover royal stories with context, reporting, and a focus on separating claims, public statements, and interpretation instead of adding extra drama. And leave a comment below telling us where you stand on all of this. Harry and Meghan, the palace, or somewhere in the middle. We read every comment. Now back to the timeline, because according to this account, concerns about private conversations did not appear overnight. According to accounts often discussed in royal coverage, those concerns did not appear overnight. Supporters of this interpretation point to a pattern of events the royal family reportedly watched develop more seriously beginning in 2020. That was the year Prince Harry and Meghan announced they would step back from their roles as senior working royals. The media quickly labeled it Megxit, although Harry and Meghan themselves did not use that term. At a personal level, many people saw it as a major break in the family dynamic. The couple moved to Southern California, stopped using their HRH titles in any official working role, and began building a media business that included a high-profile Netflix agreement. This is where the discussion around recordings and private conversations started getting more attention.
Meghan Markle has now become totally obsessed with astrology because she is trying to do everything possible to save her career, to save her marriage. Now, I don't believe any of this is genuine, you know that. But Rob Shooter has fascinating new reporting on this. He says that Meghan's new astrology obsession is running her life.
The public understanding was that part of the Sussexes' new media work would involve sharing their own experiences and perspective on life inside the royal family. Their story became a central part of the public conversation. For an institution often described as operating under the long-standing approach of never complain, never explain, that shift created concern among some royal observers. The idea that private conversations, family moments, or discussions inside palace walls could later become topics in public projects no longer felt impossible to those critics. Whether fair or not, that possibility became part of the broader debate. Then came March 2021, when Harry and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey for an interview that became one of the most watched television events of the year. During the interview, Meghan spoke about her mental health struggles during her time within the royal institution and said she felt unsupported. She also said there had been conversations and concerns raised within the family during her pregnancy about how dark Archie's skin might be. The interview became a turning point in public discussion around the monarchy. Supporters viewed it as the couple speaking openly about difficult experiences, while critics argued it increased tensions and brought private family issues into a global spotlight. That allegation immediately became one of the biggest moments from the interview. Buckingham Palace responded with a carefully written statement saying the issues raised were concerning and would be taken seriously, adding that they would be addressed privately. But according to Hugo Vickers' account in the biography, the reported reaction inside royal circles was far more emotional than the public response suggested. He writes that some members of the royal family were, in his words, sickened, not only by the content of the interview, but also by its timing. The Oprah interview aired in March 2021, shortly after Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband of more than 70 years, had been hospitalized and undergone treatment for a heart condition. According to Vickers' account, this timing added another layer of strain for family members already dealing with concern over Philip's health. Vickers writes that Queen Elizabeth II was deeply hurt by public criticism coming from her grandson. According to the book, this period marked a turning point where trust within parts of the family reportedly became more difficult to rebuild. Then came the Netflix documentary. In December 2022, Harry and Meghan released their 6-part Netflix series, describing it as a chance to tell their story in a way audiences had not heard before. The project included personal footage, home videos, and reflections on moments from their lives together. For supporters, the documentary was an opportunity for the couple to explain their experiences directly. For critics, it raised concerns about how much of private royal life was being brought into public view. Publicly, the palace did not issue major responses to the series. However, media reports at the time described frustration and surprise among some senior royals over details that appeared in the program. Then, another major moment followed. In January 2023, Prince Harry released his memoir, Spare. The book generated headlines around the world because of the level of personal detail it included about royal life and family relationships. One of the most widely discussed sections described a disagreement between Harry and his brother William that Harry portrayed as becoming physical. That account became another chapter in the ongoing public conversation about trust, privacy, and the growing distance inside the royal family. Spare included several moments that quickly became headline stories. Among the most discussed was Prince Harry's description of a confrontation with Prince William, where Harry wrote that William grabbed him during an argument and that he fell and injured himself. The memoir also included Harry's claim that Prince William and Catherine encouraged him to wear a Nazi costume to a party, an allegation that has been publicly denied by William's office. Other sections discussed personal family matters, including health-related information about King Charles and claims that Queen Consort Camilla benefited from negative press coverage directed at Harry as part of broader media dynamics. Harry also argued that Meghan faced negative briefing from palace circles early in their relationship. These claims became major points of debate and received intense media attention. Commercially, the book was a massive success. It sold more than 3 million copies in its first week and became one of the fastest-selling memoirs in British publishing history. But for many royal commentators, the impact went beyond sales numbers or difficult headlines. Critics argued that the memoir reinforced concerns that private family conversations and internal disagreements could eventually become public through interviews, documentaries, books, or media projects. That is the context surrounding Hugo Vickers' account. According to Vickers, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly became more cautious in how she handled communication. He claims she preferred not to take calls from Prince Harry unless another person was present, and that she became more careful about private interactions. Vickers suggests this caution was not only emotional but practical. According to his description, there was concern about protecting private conversations and avoiding misunderstandings about what had been said later. He raised the possibility that conversations could eventually appear in future media projects, whether documentaries, interviews, podcasts, or memoirs. Importantly, Vickers did not claim this happened, but presented it as a concern he says existed at the time. Then, in comments reported by the Daily Telegraph, Vickers added another detail that pushed the discussion even further and made people look more closely at how trust inside the royal family may have changed.
She's looking for the next thing, she's looking for the next advice, and it depends who this astrologer is. If she finds somebody as manipulative as her, if she finds somebody as unscrupulous as her, the advice could be to leave him. The advice could be your star signs tell you it's time to move on.
Vickers later explained that when the topic came up directly, the question was whether the Queen worried conversations could eventually be recorded and later used in media projects such as the Netflix docuseries. His response became one of the most quoted parts of the discussion. He said yes, wired for recording is always a possibility. He then added, "I'm not saying it happened. That distinction is important." Vickers is not accusing Prince Harry or Meghan of secretly recording conversations or making a legal allegation. His point, as presented in interviews and reporting around the book, is centered on what he believes the Queen may have feared, not on proving that any recording actually took place. Questions around recording conversations also involve different legal standards depending on location. Laws vary between the United Kingdom and the United States. And in places such as California, where Harry and Meghan live, consent requirements generally apply to recording private conversations. But Vickers' argument is not really about law. According to his account, it is about trust. His position is that Queen Elizabeth II reportedly considered the possibility seriously enough to adjust how she communicated. If that account is accurate, the bigger story is not whether recordings existed. The bigger story is that concern itself may have influenced private behavior. That distinction matters because it changes the focus from evidence to perception. If a monarch truly felt the need to have another person present during conversations with a close family member, supporters of Vickers' interpretation see that as a sign of how strained relationships may have become behind closed doors. For some observers, that suggests the situation had moved beyond an ordinary family disagreement and into broader concerns about privacy, reputation, and protecting institutional boundaries. Others argue that interpretation goes too far, and that public reporting cannot fully explain private family relationships. Harry and Meghan, for their part, have repeatedly denied leaking private family information. Their broader public position over the years has been that they chose to tell their own experiences, and that disagreement or discomfort from others does not automatically make those experiences untrue. At the time these claims circulated, reporting indicated there was no specific response issued addressing Vickers' comments directly. That is an argument many people consider reasonable. Harry has said publicly more than once that his decision to speak out and publish his memoir came from wanting to reclaim his own story, after years of what he describes as hostile press coverage and pressure connected to royal life. In Spare, Harry also argued that certain people within royal circles shared information with British tabloids in ways he believed damaged both him and Meghan over time. Those claims became a major part of his public explanation for stepping into interviews, documentaries, and publishing. His legal actions against parts of the British press added another layer to that argument. Harry has spoken openly about unlawful information gathering and reached legal settlements connected to claims involving newspaper practices. Because of that history, supporters often argue the situation is more complicated than simply dividing the story into heroes and villains. That context matters because it explains why Harry and Meghan have continued to defend telling their side publicly. But the challenge for the couple now, according to current royal coverage, is that attention is no longer focused only on what happened in 2021, 2022, or 2023. The question being asked in spring 2026 is different. What is happening now? And around the same time, Hugo Vickers' biography was released in April 2026. Another development involving Prince Harry began attracting headlines and adding fresh pressure to the public conversation. Reports at the time focused on tensions connected to Sentebale, the charity Prince Harry co-founded in 2006 alongside Prince Siso of Lesotho. The organization was created to support young people affected by HIV and AIDS in Southern Africa, and has long been associated with Harry's efforts to continue work inspired in part by Princess Diana's humanitarian legacy. Because of that history, any public dispute connected to Sentebale immediately drew attention. The organization has always carried symbolic weight for Harry. Even its name, drawn from Sesotho and commonly translated as "forget-me-not," reflects themes of remembrance and long-term commitment. That is why the recent headlines surprised so many people. For observers, it stood out because this was not another royal interview, another media deal, or another family disagreement. This involved a project closely tied to Harry's public identity for nearly 2 decades. Now the story takes another turn. According to reports surrounding the dispute, the organization Prince Harry helped create has become part of a legal conflict that has pulled attention far beyond the charity world. The background is complicated, but the basic outline presented in reporting is this. Internal disagreements at Sentebale were said to have been developing from around 2023 onward, with debate around fundraising direction and disagreements involving then-chair Sophie Chandoka. Those tensions reportedly escalated over time. By March 2025, multiple trustees had stepped down. Prince Harry and Prince Sieso later announced they were also stepping away from their roles as patrons, saying they were acting in support of those trustees. After that, the disagreement became public. Chandoka gave interviews and publicly raised allegations against Harry, including claims relating to racism and misogyny. And reports said concerns were also submitted to the Charity Commission for England and Wales. Later reporting stated that the Commission's review did not find evidence supporting broader claims of widespread or systemic bullying and harassment as originally alleged. But the dispute did not end there. According to reporting on the legal action, Sentebale later alleged that Harry and his close friend and former trustee Mark Dyer were involved in a coordinated media effort directed at the charity's leadership. The organization argued that this contributed to operational difficulties and increased online abuse aimed at staff and the charity itself. Harry and Dyer strongly rejected those allegations. A spokesperson responding on their behalf described the claims as offensive and harmful and questioned the decision to pursue legal action involving people who had supported the organization over many years. Later reports also stated that funding connected to the legal case was coming from private sources rather than charitable donations. At this stage, the dispute remains part of an ongoing public disagreement, with both sides presenting sharply different versions of events and defending their actions publicly. The timing added even more attention to the situation. Reports about the legal dispute surfaced on the 10th of April 2026, just as Harry and Meghan were traveling to Australia for what was presented as a schedule of philanthropic appearances and business-related engagements in Melbourne and Sydney. That overlap quickly became part of the media narrative. Some British commentators criticized the trip and questioned how it was being presented, arguing that parts of the visit looked closer to public profile appearances than traditional charity work. Supporters pushed back and argued the couple had continued to combine public advocacy with commercial projects for years, and that this framing was unfair. During the visit, Harry and Meghan were photographed at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne on April 14. For critics, the timing created difficult optics because public attention was simultaneously focused on reports of legal action connected to Sentebale, the charity Harry helped establish. Supporters, however, argued that continuing scheduled commitments during a public dispute should not automatically be treated as contradictory. But that was not the only major story unfolding at the same time. As coverage of the biography, the lawsuit, and the Australia trip continued, King Charles III was carrying out an official 4-day state visit to the United States. One detail attracted particular attention. There was no reported public meeting scheduled with Prince Harry, who lives in Montecito, California. According to reporting at the time, Charles and Queen Camilla arrived in Washington on the 27th of April, 2026. The king delivered formal addresses, attended official events, met with U.S. political leaders, participated in a state dinner, and made additional appearances connected to the visit. Stops included Washington, New York, Virginia, and later travel onward to Bermuda. California was not part of the announced schedule. That detail led to immediate speculation about family relations. But royal commentators were careful with their interpretation. Many pointed out that state visits are planned through government channels and usually follow strict diplomatic schedules. From that perspective, the absence of a California stop was not necessarily evidence of a personal message or deliberate distance. Instead, they argued the visit appeared focused on broader political and diplomatic goals, including US-UK relations, security discussions, trade interests, and formal state business rather than private family matters. Even so, for people already watching every signal coming from both sides of the royal story, the timing became impossible to ignore. But not every report framed the situation the same way. Sources quoted by Naughty But Nice, the Substack newsletter run by royal reporter Rob Shooter, suggested a different interpretation of why there was no public father and son meeting. According to that reporting, the Sussex's Australia trip may have affected whatever private progress had reportedly existed toward reconnecting Harry and King Charles. One source summarized that view directly, saying, "That trip killed it." According to this account, concerns inside palace circles were less about travel itself and more about appearances. The suggestion was that some people viewed Harry and Meghan's Australia visit as resembling a quasi-royal tour because of the schedule of public engagements, hospital visits, and the formal tone surrounding parts of the trip. The same source claimed there was concern that a meeting between Harry and the king during that period could create a public image of closeness to the monarchy. The source described fears that a photo opportunity might make Harry appear, in their words, back tied to the crown. That is a strong interpretation, and it remains the view of unnamed sources rather than a confirmed palace position. Supporters of Harry would argue that this reading assumes motives without evidence and overlooks what Harry himself has said publicly over the past few years. After losing his legal challenge related to security arrangements in the United Kingdom, Harry gave interviews where he spoke openly about wanting reconciliation with his family. In comments widely reported at the time, he said, "I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point continuing to fight anymore." He also spoke about time and uncertainty, saying life is precious and referencing concern about his father's health. To supporters, those comments sounded less like public positioning and more like someone expressing frustration, regret, and a desire to repair relationships while there is still time. Critics see the situation differently and argue that years of public interviews, media projects, and memoir disclosures made rebuilding trust far more difficult. That is where the story sits in May 2026. Publicly, there are statements about reconciliation and moving forward. At the same time, there are ongoing debates about trust, privacy, public image, and whether private family repair is still possible under constant global attention. This is not the future many people imagined back in May 2018, when Harry and Meghan stood at Windsor Castle and made their vows in front of a global audience. At the time, the story looked like the beginning of a new chapter for the monarchy, one that many hoped would bring change, stability, and a stronger family connection. And according to accounts often discussed in royal reporting, it was likely not the outcome Queen Elizabeth II hoped for either. Publicly, she welcomed the marriage and appeared supportive during those early years as the couple settled into royal life. Hugo Vickers argues in his biography that the final years of the Queen's life were marked by real sadness over the family divide, and that the strain surrounding the Sussex situation should not be underestimated. That is a serious claim coming from someone whose work and access have kept him close to royal history for decades. But this story does not hand out a final verdict. Some people believe Harry and Meghan created distance by taking private struggles into public view. Others believe the institution failed to adapt and that the couple simply chose to speak openly about experiences they felt had been ignored. What seems harder to dispute is that the relationship changed, the consequences became public, and the effects are still being debated today. Whether reconciliation eventually happens, or whether these divisions become permanent, is a question that remains unanswered. If you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone following the royal story. And drop a comment below, whose perspective do you understand more? Harry and Meghan's? The palace's? Or do you think responsibility sits somewhere in the middle?